America's neighbor to the north, Canada, is still part of what's left of the British Empire. And today, Ottawa transformed into a scene out of The Crown. King Charles was welcomed with a verse of the Canadian national anthem, as you heard there, as he arrived at Parliament to deliver remarks known as, quote, speech from the throne. But while he's addressing Canadians, it's really an American audience. Well, an audience of one inside the White House that King Charles was really speaking to. CNN's Paula Newton is live in Ottawa. So, Paula, parts of the speech seem to be very clear he was taking on President Trump's push to make Canada the 51st state.
Yeah, 100%. Look, Dana, this was a bold invitation to the king, duly accepted by the king, and the speech itself was bold. Not that there's anything that President Trump should be taking offense to here, but the fact that Mark Carney, and again, a reminder, Mark Carney and his government wrote this speech. It is the king's speech in that he gives it in Parliament, but these are the words of this government going forward, and they wanted the White House and allies beyond to hear them loud and clear. Canada is sovereign and very distinct from the United States. Listen.
Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect. The system of open global trade that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for Canadians for decades, is changing. Canada's relationships with partners are also changing.
And again, in diplomatic language, Mark Carney's government writing for the king that indeed President Trump is transformational, right? But Canada making it clear that it still believes in free trade, and going forward, it has some priorities. Again, like the free trade, like, in fact, those distinct values that harken back to its policies on the environment, or even an immigration system. All of those things very distinct in Canada. Those were the king's words as written by Mark Carney's government. I have to say, though, a couple of things that President Trump will like. Two specifically, and that is reinforcement of the security of that northern border and a commitment to rearm the Canadian armed forces. Look, there was a lot said here that you could take, kind of read it between the lines, but I'm sure the White House will not take much offense to this. And again, they did point out that there is a lot that brings these countries closer together. King Charles' speech, certainly a commitment to, in his words, keeping Canada free and sovereign.
Before I let you go, two details of much lesser importance, but I think they're fascinating because Isaac was asking, and I didn't know the answer, but you did. The throne and the carriage. Can you talk about those?
All in storage here, and they are kept here, before for the Queen and now for the King and Queen. They are kept here in Canada. They bring them out, they polish them specifically for these occasions. There aren't many of them, but even that royal carriage, right? And also the spectacular RCMP musical ride. They escorted the Queen and the King. They have been practicing like mad. This was a quick visit, less than 24 hours, and put together in just a few weeks. A tall order. The weather helped here, Dana. It was spectacular.
Well, that's a first for Canada, probably. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I love it. Paula, appreciate it. And just a reminder, the scene in the Oval Office 3 weeks ago when President Trump repeatedly floated Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state during his meeting with Canada's new Prime Minister.
It would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale. Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever.
But never say never. Never say never.
My panel is back. So Isaac, since you asked that great question, which we got the answer
he has
to.
anything.
Yeah, he's done.
done.
He's asked an answer.
That's it.
I have to say that I have been mildly obsessed with this, slightly small detail, that the reason why Canada, one of the main reasons why, as Mark Carney said, Canada is not for sale, is because it is part of the former or I guess what is left, as I said, of the British Empire, that he's going to have to go through King Charles first to get Canada. And the fact that the king had this event in Ottawa just, an hour ago, as Paula said, did it on short notice, clearly with a message. It's so fascinating, particularly because we know how President Trump loves the British monarchy.
Yeah, and part of when the British Prime Minister was there a couple of weeks before Carney, what he did is he brought a letter from King Charles inviting him. There's all of that to get into Trump's head that way. Look, I'm hesitant to quote a headline from another network, but the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, in this case, I think more, that they led with a quote from King Charles saying, "The true North is indeed strong and free." There is no question here that this is Canada and the British monarch saying, "Get out of here. This is not a real conversation." Mm-hmm. And look, this is one of these many things where Donald Trump says things, and we go through this debate of, is he joking around? Does he mean it? And in this case, as in other cases, and what's going on with Harvard, we were talking about in the last segment, the reaction from the world is not, hey, that's just something you're tweeting about, but is, no, we are not playing around with this.
And Carney talked about Canada's owners in that moment in the Oval Office, and we're actually seeing the way that Canadians are reacting to this and the way Americans are reacting along the U.S. northern border and how that is affecting their own trade, how that is affecting their own travel. So while we talk about this in a macro sense and the relationship between these countries, there's also a very micro relationship that is being disrupted in the middle of all of this dialogue.
They're pissed.
They are.
The Canadians are pissed. And let me show you some data on that. Canadians boycotting U.S. goods, 76%. 76%. So 3/4 of Canadians say that they're not buying U.S. goods, American goods. Now, here's another stat. Canadian travel from the U.S., which is kind of a big deal for a lot of American hospitality, U.S. hospitality, by plane, down 20%, by car, down 35%. And these are actual statistics taken by Canada as they clock who comes back into their country.
That's really fascinating, and also just putting those numbers in context. I was really interested by a trip that a bipartisan group of senators took to Ottawa in the last several days. I mean, senators always do these types of codels, but this was kind of a little mini diplomatic mission to show Canada that U.S. is still your friend and still your neighbor. And in the words of our friend Isaac DeVere, that is where we're at, where we have to reassure Canada that we are still friends with them. But the business statistic was really interesting because the one Republican on the trip, Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota, said, we want to make sure we want to do business with our friend Canada. I mean, this isn't just a Trump spat that he's, perpetuating. I mean, this affects, like Priscilla said, the economy, trade. It is very important that U.S. and Canada have a working, vital relationship.
I'm glad you mentioned Kevin Cramer because I, too, have a quote from him ready.
Very quotable man.
I don't want to get in Donald Trump's way. There's no trade deal that happens without his involvement. But at the same time, I want to be an encourager to Canada that their officials and try to be a partner in some way, as you mentioned. Hopefully, I navigated it okay, but I'll find out on Truth Social. All of that, which you kind of mentioned at the beginning, but that last part is just so perfect because they know that if they get crosswise with the president, they're going to hear about it not in private, but they'll get blasted in public.
Or potentially both. In Kevin Cramer's case, I assume he would also get a phone call from the president as well. I see this with literally no snark. Kevin Cramer's probably the best diplomat that you could send in this situation, in the sense that he was one of the first people to endorse President Trump back in 2016. He's always had a good, I think, candid relationship with him. And he gets along with Democrats. He's very quotable when you talk to him in the press, so we like him a lot. But I think more importantly, he understands the deeply integrated economic realities, given his state and the border in North Dakota. And I think that matters a lot. The other thing, too, I would just keep an eye on, you mentioned King Charles and how the president and the invite to the second state visit was so critical and really pitched out by the Prime Minister when he came to the White House. The president's relationship with Mark Carney is very, very different than it was with Justin Trudeau. I cannot overstate how personally people inside the White House, the president on down, viscerally loathed on a personal level Justin Trudeau for whatever the reasons were going back to the first term. Carney's different, and they are trying
even though they're the same party.
Even though they're the same party, they are trying to establish a relationship. Both sides, I think, are actually making a good faith effort at this point. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.